Okay, so the very first step is to install the USB drivers for your Icom radio. Now, this is important. Don't forget this. Immediately stop doing what you're doing and unplug the USB cable to the radio. If it is in place when you install the drivers, the installation will fail. So keep that in mind. You must have it unplugged. So the first thing I usually do when I want to install the drivers is I go look for them. So I'm going to type in Icom IC7610 USB drivers. And then we get a list. Now you'll see this looks like the most recent one, June 7th, 2018. By the way, the Japan website has the most up-to-date drivers. Now I'll click on that. Okay, and it'll see that this is the USB driver for various radios, including the 7300, the 7600, 7610, 785051. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to agree, and it's going to start the download. And here it comes. So once it's downloaded, then I'm going to want to extract it and install it. So let's just wait, should be a few more seconds and we'll be done. And here it comes. Okay, so the download is complete. So I would click on that. Okay, I would then say extract all and take the defaults in Windows. It's going to put it in this folder and it's going to say show extracted files when complete. So I'm going to say OK, extract, and there it goes. Okay, then I presume it's in this folder. I'm going to look, you see that there's folders for Windows 7 and 8, and there is a folder for Windows 10. So I'm going to pick Windows 10, and since I have the 64-bit version of the driver, I am going to take this one. So I basically just have to double click on it, say next, and it's finished. In this particular case, the drivers are already installed, so it just went ahead without doing anything, but it'll look exactly the same. So I'll now click on finished. Okay, so that should have installed the drivers. Okay, the next step, now that that is done, is to plug in the USB cable. That's what I'm going to do right at this moment. Okay, I have now plugged in the USB cable to my radio. And the next step I'm going to want to do is to open up the control panel, the Windows control panel. Here I have it. Okay, and I want to select the device manager. So I'm going to click on the device manager. Okay, and we're going to look at this entry here called ports. Okay, so if I click on that, lo and behold, we have the particular COM port assigned to the radio installed. In most cases you won't have so many, but I've got 3 radios here, so I have 3 different ports. I happen to know that this particular COM port, COM14, is the one connected to my 7610. So if everything looks good, that's great. You're all ready to go. So we can close out of this. Just keep that in mind. It's that. We now need to take a look at the radio settings, because there's a couple of things that need to be set. Okay, on the 7610, what you're going to want to do is go into the menu system. Now it's going to be the same on any radio, pretty well the same. I'm going to go into the menu system. I'm going to select set, and then I'm going to go into connectors, and I'm going to select CIV. Okay, there's a couple of menus, pages there. The thing that's important is the CIV USB port has to be unlinked from remote. And then on the second page, the CIV USB baud rate has to be set at 115,200. Those are the 2 things that need to be done, and that's it. Now we'll exit from the program, back down to the main screen. Okay, now that we have the USB drivers installed and the radio set up correctly, we're now going to start Win4IcomSuite. So you would download it from icom.va2fsq.com and then do the installation. Here we go. So let's start up the program. The first time that you start up the program, or if you've disconnected from a previous install, you will come to this menu automatically. This is the settings menu of Win4IcomSuite. First thing you're going to want to do is set the radio model. Okay, in this case it's going to be a 7610. That will pick automatically a default address. The next thing we want to do is we want to go into the radio connection. And here we have the COM port that we saw in the device manager that came about after installing the USB device drivers. So here we are. We're going to go in and pick COM14 and the baud rate of 115/200. We'll talk about the network later on in the video. We'll have the discussion of this along with the client server network install. Alright, so for now, this is all you have to do to get started. You can click on Connect, and away you go. Then just click on Save. And there we go. We have Win4IcomSuite running. If everything is okay, everything should work. You should be able to open up the spectrum scope and so forth. And there you go. Now that we have Win4IcomSuite talking to the radio with a direct USB connection, we're now going to take a look at how to set up a network connection. The first thing you're going to want to do is go to the icom.va2fsq.com website, go into the download section, and further down the page will be a link to download Win4IcomSuite client server software. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to download it, and then we're going to install it. So this has already been done in this case. Once that's complete, you'll have two icons that appear on the desktop. One is the server and one is the client. So let's start off with the server. Let's open the application up, and this is what we get. If you take a look at this, there are three sections. There's a section concerned with the control of the radio. That is involved with making the connection to the radio over the USB port. Another section is the audio control. And then we have a section where various messages and which clients are connected and so forth. So let's start off with the radio control. Typically for applications that connect like this one, all right, you have to provide two pieces of information. The first one is the address of the server, and the second one is the port. IP addresses and IP ports go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. Okay, so the very first thing is the default port is set up as 50,001. I use that port because that's what Icom uses for its own networking application. I figure that's a good port to use. But then the question comes, what do we use for the IP address? By default, the IP address is set up to be the address called the local machine. This is the address that is assigned to every machine out there, and it means the local machine. Anything you do on there via networking on the local port can only be within the local machine. So if you want to do this, you can pick this, and then when you set up the client a little bit later, you would take the same address. The problem with this, though, is you lack a little bit of flexibility. What if you want to run on the local machine and you also want to run somewhere else on your local area network, let's say from a laptop upstairs or whatever? There you're going to need to use an IP address of the server that's exposed to outside of that machine, outside of the machine. So how do you find what address to use? Well, you're going to want to open up the control panel. Once the control panel is open, you're going to want to go into Network and Sharing Center. And you will open that up. And what you will see is your active network. In my case, it's called Network 4. And the connection is Ethernet. Now that's the thing that we're going to want to look at. So we're going to want to look at this. We click on that. This gives the general overall information about your connection, but we then need to look at the details. So we'll click on the Details button and take a look down here. Here we have an entrance called IP version 4 address. This is the address you're going to want to use. Now if you take a look at this This one, it's 192.168.1.103. That is the address of the Ethernet adapter on this computer, and it's the address that anything from the outside world will need to connect to. So I'm going to take that, close, I'm going to close out of here, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to change that to 192.168.1.103. Okay, so that's the IP address I'm going to use. I'm always going to use this IP address on this machine, even if I decide in the future to do the connection by the internet. Okay, it still needs to be set to the local area network address of, as we see here. Okay, the other things that need to be filled in here, first of all, there's the COM port. That's going to be exactly the same COM port that you saw set up previously, where you connect to your radio. You use the same baud rate. Then you're going to want to pick a username and a password. Now this is used by the control program to connect to the radio, by the client. So when you're operating outside of the LAN or on the internet, you're going to provide this username and password, and then you'll be able to connect to the server. Without that, you cannot connect. So that's pretty easy to set up. Next, we're going to take a look at audio control. Now, the audio control is similar to the radio control in that you need an IP address and you need a port. Now, the ports have to be different, okay, because different information being sent across them. So I put as default 50,002. The IP address is exactly the same, so it doesn't appear here. It uses the IP address that is defined up here. Okay, so we have the port defined and we're using the same address. Now there's a few other things that need to be done. First of all, we need to specify which audio device on this computer will be used to send and receive sound. Now, as it turns out, the Icom USB installation will install two USB audio codecs. One called the microphone and one called the speakers. Now, if you take a look in there, if you have more than one Icom radio, then there might be more, or if you have another sound adapter, there may be more than just these two. In that case, you'll see a USB 2, then a USB 3, and so forth. I'll show a little bit of how this looks. Here we have the server, and that's the application that's running. The sound comes out of the server and goes to the speak section. It acts like a microphone. That's what we have right here. Sound that's coming from the client comes into this codec, which is the speakers, and that is what is the sound input for the radio. Okay, so that is that particular setup. You'll have to select the ones appropriate for your system. For example, there's microphone, there's a few others here, but I'm going to pick that one because I know it's correct. Okay, once you've got that, that's basically all you need to do to set up the client. You can leave everything else as default. I will explain a little bit about this. Okay, for the audio control, you have the ability to have different sampling rates. Okay, they can go from 5,000 up to 44,100 samples per second. I believe that 8 kilohertz is a good sampling rate. That gives you an audio bandwidth of about 4 kilohertz. So that will cover most of the items that you will be doing in ham radio. Okay. The other thing here that shows up is this jitter buffers. Now, sound over the internet has to be real time, but the internet is not real time. So if we were just to start sending the sound packets from the radio out to the client without any buffering, okay, lots of packets will arrive delayed, for example, and so forth. So what you want to have is you want to have a buffer. Okay, so in this case, this is set to have 10 buffers. So what happens is that for the server, it initially will fill the 10 buffers, and it'll then start sending the data across to the client. Now on the client, you will also set 10 buffers. So the minute it's got 10 buffers, it will start playing the sound. This acts as a buffer to the internet where some packets may not come in the necessary time. They may be delayed, but then you'll still have packets in the buffer that will make up for this. So 10 is a good starting point. If you start seeing that you're losing packets, and I'll show you in a little while what that'll look like, increase it. Try 15, then try 20. Each buffer delays the sound by about 16 milliseconds. So you don't want to put it too high. Okay, so that's basically it for the server. Nothing else to configure there. Now let's take a look at the client. So I'm opening up the client, and it's already been pre-configured here, of course. And okay, so just like the server, there are two sections here. One is where the remote radio is. Now this concerns only sound. Okay, this has nothing to do with actually connecting to the control part of Win4IcomSuite. That's done in the Win4IcomSuite application. In this case, the client is only concerned with sound. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to put in the same address that you have up here, and you're going to want to put in the port for the audio, which is there. This is all done by default, and you would want the jitter buffers to be the same. Okay, so once that's all set up, all you got to do is come in here and click on Connect for the server. It tells you that it's connected to COM14, it's connected to your radio, and the server is running. Then you're going to want to come into the client, and this of course can be on another machine, and when you click Connect, it will start working. Okay, now once you've done the connection, what you're seeing here is the quality of the connection, essentially. Okay, this is directly related to the number of jitter buffers you have. So the sound comes in, goes to this buffer, starts getting sent to the client. Now if you take a look on the client, it's pretty solid here, but if you were out over the internet, it might not be. It might be moving quite a bit. What you don't want to find is that the green disappears completely. If it goes completely to the left, then you do not have enough buffers, and you should stop both sides, disconnect on both sides, and increase the buffers. Okay, so try 15 next time. That's basically it. That is all you need to do for the network installation. Now that we have the Icom server and client set up correctly, we're now going to turn our attention to using Win4IcomSuite with the network connectivity. So we're going to want to start up the software, and here we go. And since we were already connected to the USB port before, you may get an error saying that they cannot connect, but then the settings window will turn up. And that's because the USB port is now in use by the server. So I'm going to click on OK, and here we go. We're going to want to put in the address, same as up here, 192.168.1.103, the same port, 50,001, and then I'm going to make sure that you've got the username and password that match the username and password here, and then we're going to click on Connect. If all's well, it should say client connected from address. This is the same address, and this should switch to disconnect, and then I just press save. And lo and behold, there's the software. Notice that I put the speakers on mute, and that's because we would also be getting the sound of the radio over at the same time while I'm talking, and I don't want that at the moment. So that's basically it. We now have a full connection, same way as when you're using it directly connected to the radio. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It certainly was a pleasure making it, and thanks very much for your support.